We are going to talk about the endocrine system. The endocrine system basically is a diverse group of ductless glands that plays a very major role in maintaining the homeostasis of multiple physiological variables. This group of gland basically works very closely with the other system that maintains the homeostasis of multiple physiological variables, the nervous system. Although these two systems both work toward the same goal, you will also notice that the method by which they do so differ. The nervous system basically functions via action potential and also releases neurotransmitters that directly affect target cells. The effects are nearly immediate, but they are very short in duration. In contrast, as you can see here, endocrine system is the one which works by secreting hormones into the bloodstream. The effect in here is little longer and it may not be immediate, but they are always longer lasting than those of nervous system. There is a common thing among both of these systems that both of these systems communicate via chemicals that bind to the receptor molecules. So, understanding this difference between how a nervous system works and how an endocrine system works makes us understand these two systems deeply. Through this picture, you can clearly see the way these two systems are working is via chemical communication. If you remember, you have learned the neuron structure. So this is your neuron, which is providing signal to this muscle. And if you remember from your ANP1, you will see that neuron conducts impulses via neurotransmitters. So the impulses which has been conducted over here, the signal will be given to the muscles via neurotransmitters. This place where this neuron is releasing the neurotransmitter is called as synapse. Whereas if you see here, this is a pictorial depiction of how endocrine system work. So in endocrine system, we talk about various glands, and these are those bunch of cells from any particular gland, and that's why these cells are called as glandular cells. These are secreting the hormones into the bloodstream, and blood is the mechanism by which these hormones are released and also transported to the target cells. Now, once they reach here to the target cell, they will act particularly on very specific cell on which you find some receptors. Okay, so the target cells are the cells with the hormone receptors, and that's why you can see this green stuff, which is also called as hormones. They're going to work specifically only on these green cells and not in these yellow cells. Okay, and that is why endocrine system is very precise in that it only targets the target cells, and only target cells can respond to a specific hormone. Target cell also contain particular receptors for the hormone, like I said, and these receptors are not present in any other cell. Let's just understand the general characteristics of endocrine system. First is, what's the difference between endocrine gland and exocrine gland? Now, endocrine gland is nothing but a group of cells. And you all know that cells combine to form tissues and tissues combine to form organ. So a gland basically is an organ that make up the endocrine system. So it's a group of these glands. These are ductless and they secrete their hormones directly into the bloodstream. Endocrine word basically means internal secretion. And keep in mind, hormones which are released from these endocrine glands are the chemical messengers which are going to act only on the target cells. The second type of glands which we see in the human body are called as exocrine gland, and these are the glands which contain duct. And these are the duct which will bring the secretion of these glands to the body surface. And that's why these glands secrete their secretion externally. They deliver their product directly to the specific site. These are also the glands that secrete messenger molecules, which will include paracrine secretions and also the autocrine. Paracrine secretions are the ones which affect only the nearby cells, and autocrine secretion is the one which affects the cells that secrete the substances. To make you understand a little further, if you look at this picture, this over here is a thyroid gland, and the secretion from the cells of these glands is going to be hormones, and those hormones will go to your body via bloodstream. Okay, so these are the type of endocrine glands where they secrete hormones directly into the body fluid, which is your blood, versus the exocrine gland, and here the example is the sweat gland. You have learned this as well in your ANP1 under the skin chapter, where we have seen that the sweat gland has a duct which opens it to the skin surface. And as you can see here, it's not going to the blood. The sweat doesn't get absorbed via any of the blood vessels. Okay, so that is something which you have to keep in mind, that the difference between endocrine gland and exocrine gland. Hormone action. Over here, if you look at this picture, is describing you various glands and their location. Hormones as such, like I said before, in general, they regulate the processes of other cells, including inducing the production of enzymes, which are your biological catalyst, or other hormones, changing the metabolic rate of a cell, altering the permeability of the plasma membrane, and etc. In simpler word, you might think of hormone as the middle managers of the body, because they communicate the message from their bosses, which is their endocrine gland, and tell the workers, which is the other cell, what to do. Some endocrine glands, for example thyroid and anterior pituitary, secrete hormones as their primary function. Okay, that means their main function is to secrete hormone. However, there are others which secrete hormone as their secondary function, and examples of which are heart, in which we have arterial natriuretic peptide. Adipose tissue secretes leptin, which is a hormone. Kidneys also secrete a hormone called as erythropoietin, and stomach is also known to secrete a hormone called as gastrin. Okay. In this chapter, moving further, we are going to understand the anatomy, histology, and physiology of the endocrine system and function of the hormones. There are basically 10 organs in the body that have hormone secretion as their primary function, and those include hypothalamus, pituitary gland, thyroid gland, adrenal gland, and pancreas. Other than these, you also have pineal gland, thymus, ovaries, and testes over here. Some hormones are produced by a small group of special cells in the body which are located randomly. Over here, what you see is a table where you have the gland located as the source. And like I said, these are the primary endocrine glands where primary function of them is to release hormones. So these are the name of those hormones which are released by the glands. And in the third column, you will see their abbreviation, because moving forward, you might see words like CRH, GnRH, SS, FSH, GHLH. So these are much more commonly used words because it makes us easier to understand. And then these are the synonyms. In one book, you might see they're describing gonadotropin releasing hormone as luteinizing hormone releasing hormone. So do not get confused. You can always come back to this table. So this is a basic table which describes the gland and what all hormones it is releasing. So if you notice here, hypothalamus is releasing these hormones. Then you have anterior pituitary gland, which is mainly releasing prolactin, follicle stimulating hormone, growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone. In posterior pituitary gland, you have two of these hormone, ADH, which is antidiuretic hormone, oxytocin. Then similarly, thyroid has three basic hormones: parathyroid, adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex, and pancreas. Moving further, we are going to look into each one of this in detail, and we are going to talk about the functions of these hormones and how do they regulate the metabolism of the body and maintain the homeostasis. But to start with, it's very important that we understand the basic structure and function of the hormones depending upon what they are basically made up of. So when you look at the hormones, and I'm talking about all of the hormones which are secreted by these glands, they can be categorized into two types. One is steroid or steroid-like hormone. Now, if you go back to your ANP1 classes, you might remember that we talk about steroids under the lipids and biomolecules. So one of the special type of lipid was steroid. So if a hormone is steroid-like hormone, that means it is made up of lipids containing complex rings of carbon and hydrogen atoms. Okay. Now these steroids, they are the hormones which are produced by the raw material called as cholesterol. So cholesterol is not that bad. We actually need it to make the important hormones of our body, which are maintaining the homeostasis and regulating the various metabolic processes. Examples of these steroid hormones include your sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, adrenal cortex hormone, which includes cortisol, and aldosterone. Now, the second type is non-steroid hormone, which can be divided into four basic types: amines, proteins, peptides, and glycoproteins. Amines, basically, they are coming from amino acids. So if you slightly modify a single amino acid, you will get amine. And that's why it's saying derived from tyrosine, which is a type of amino acid, the monomer unit of protein, if you remember. The examples are epinephrine and non-epinephrine. Then you have proteins. If you make a chain of amino acid, you will get protein. And your growth hormone basically is a protein. Then you have peptides, which is short chain of amino acid and not the long chain. And the example is oxytocin, one of the hormone which is required for birth of the child. Then you have glycoprotein, as the word itself is saying. Glyco means carbohydrates and protein means protein. So a mixture of protein and carbohydrate forms the glycoprotein, and the example is TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, depending on whether a hormone is steroid or non-steroid, the action of hormone might differ. But in general, hormones play a very important role by altering the metabolic processes. They may alter the enzymatic activity inside the cell, or they may alter the rate of membrane transport of a substance. But basically, hormones, they pass on their message by binding to the receptors on the target cell, like I showed you earlier. They can affect the changes in the target cell even in extremely low concentration, and that's why they are very, very specific and very, very efficient. We also want to understand that if you alter the number of receptors on a particular target cell, you might change or alter the response of that hormone in that particular cell. And that can be called as upregulation or downregulation. Upregulation basically means you increase in the number of receptors on the target cell in response to a decrease in hormone level. Similarly, downregulation means you are decreasing the number of receptors due to increase in hormone level. Now, this is the picture which actually describes how a hormone, which is steroid, okay, or steroid derived hormone, which basically means hormone which contains lipid in its structure, and you can see it is 4 rings, which is a very typical structure similar to cholesterol. Okay, also the thyroid hormone, and lipids we know are insoluble in water, right? Now comes your basic understanding of cell membrane. If you have learned in ANP1, we have seen that cellular membrane contains polar head, which is water soluble, and contain tails, which are non-polar, but they are not water soluble. Okay, and we also understood in ANP1 that it's easier for the lipid molecules to pass this membrane easily just because it has the non-polar tails in between. And that's what is more important here. Now, if a hormone is steroid type or a thyroid type, its function or the action or mode of action is going to be a little bit different from any hormone which is non-steroid or water soluble. And the reason is the hormone molecule can easily pass through the cell membrane. Okay, so what happens is a steroid hormone reaches to the target cell and can easily cross the membrane. Now, once it crosses the membrane, it reaches to the cytoplasm of the cell. It can either bind to a protein or something over here to alter the metabolism, or in fact, it can go inside to the nucleus and then, like you can see here, and then it binds to a protein receptor inside the nucleus. Now here, if you see, this protein receptor was not activated earlier, but as soon as you have this hormone coming in here, it combines with this, and this whole protein complex become activated, which basically means that it is going to now go ahead and bind to the DNA, which will increase the transcription rate. Okay, so if it is going to bind, it will either increase the transcription rate or it will start the transcription. And if you remember again in your ANP, we learned about how DNA is copied into mRNA, which is called as transcription, and mRNA goes out of the nucleus, and in the cytoplasm it goes through the process of translation where the code from mRNA can be decoded in the form of a protein molecule, which you see here. And exactly same thing happens here. As soon as this hormone receptor complex gets activated, it activates the transcription of a particular protein for which this hormone has signal for. And once that gets activated, the mRNA will form. The newly formed mRNA will go out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm, and over here via translation, a new protein will form. Once you have this newly formed protein up here, it will now either alter the metabolism inside the cell, whatever, depending upon whatever this hormone is bringing signal for, and or it might go out and get transported out. Okay, and that's how a steroid or a thyroid hormones basically work at the cellular level. This picture basically is describing what happens when the hormone is non-steroid, which means either it could be amine, protein, polypeptide, or a glycoprotein. So, of course, water-soluble hormone, it's not easy for that hormone to cross the cellular membrane easily, and because of that, it combines with the protein which is present on the cell membrane. Okay, so this is called as receptor, okay, to which the hormone is binding. So non-steroid hormones bind the receptor molecule on the cell membrane. Hormones binding activates the molecule of adenylate cyclase. Now over here, if you notice this, the hormone is binding to this, and you might be wondering how is it impacting or activating the adenylate cyclase. Now for that, there is a G protein over here which is attached to this receptor. As soon as this hormone binding happens, there is a change in conformation and structure which changes and alters the shape of adenylate cyclase. Okay. Now, adenylate cyclase is also a protein found in the cellular membrane, which actually converts ATP, the energy molecule, into cyclic AMP, which is having a cyclic adenosine monophosphate. Okay. Adenylate cyclase catalyzes this conversion of ATP into CMP, and CMP now activates the existing proteins, which could be your kinases. So kinases usually are the proteins which remain inactive, and as soon as you have the signal coming in, they become activated, and once they have activated, they can bring the cellular changes in the cytoplasm. So you can see the two major differences I can show you is that steroid hormone has the capacity to go inside the nucleus and bring the change by acting at the DNA level itself, whereas non-steroid hormones are going to act in the cytoplasm, okay, itself. So those are the two ways how the hormones can act to bring a change at the cellular level. Then we're going to talk about these paracrine substances, which are also hormone-like but very, very potent, even though they are found in very smaller quantities or amount. Okay, they are a little bit different from hormones for the fact that they are not stored in the cell, but they are the ones which get synthesized immediately before the release. They can rapidly inactivate it after use. They are the ones which can activate or inhibit the adenylate cyclase. They control the cyclic AMP production, alter a cellular's response to the hormone. By using these prostaglandins, you can have a wide range of effects in your body, which includes controlling your blood pressure, inhibiting or stimulating any secretion of hormone, contracting and relaxing the smooth muscles which are not in your control, controlling the movement of water and sodium in and out of kidneys, and also promoting the inflammation. Next, if you look here, as far as controlling or regulation of these hormones are concerned, you have three basic ways. One is tropic hormones, second is nervous system control, and third is changes in the internal environment. Okay, so if you see here, you can see endocrine gland, and over here this anterior pituitary or hypothalamus is also the endocrine gland. So basically we are trying to understand how and what signal stimulate the endocrine system to secrete the hormone. Okay, so the first thing is that there is this gland hypothalamus which is secreting the hormone which is very close to pituitary gland, and that's why it is called as tropic hormones. And the hormones which are released by hypothalamus are going to act on the pituitary gland cell and stimulate the anterior pituitary to release the endocrine hormones. Okay, so it's the hormone from one gland which is stimulating the other gland to release the hormone. Okay, so hormone itself can act on the gland and stimulate the secretion of the hormone. The second type is nervous system control. Here you can clearly see that it's the signal from the nervous system which is stimulating the endocrine gland to secrete the hormone. For example, when you're hungry and you see the food, your brain gets stimulated and the signal from your brain reaches to the salivary gland and allows the secretion of the saliva. Now that's the exocrine gland, your salivary gland, but it is working in a similar way. Similarly, when you look at the third type, changes in the internal environment. Okay, for example, you eat food and your blood glucose level increases, which is changing levels of substance in the blood plasma, which will stimulate endocrine gland to secrete. And which endocrine gland it'll be? It'll be your pancreas to release a hormone, for example, insulin, to be secreted so that the glucose level can be brought down. So basically there are three different ways. One is hormone itself can stimulate the gland, second by nervous system, and third by changing levels of the substance in the blood plasma, which can bring out or secrete the stimulate the gland to secrete the hormones. Now, coming to the homeostatic control of these hormone levels, basically hormone secretion is mainly under the control of various negative feedback mechanisms. So going back again to ANP1 in your first chapter, I'm pretty sure we know what is a homeostasis. Homeostasis is the mechanism of maintaining the internal stable conditions of various variables. Okay, so if you see here, hormones play a very important role and their secretion also is controlled by negative feedback loop. Okay, so if you see here, supposingly your hormone levels are normal and suddenly they become too high, so it increases, so the stimulus is increase in the hormone level. Those hormones will reach to the target cell. Hormone control mechanism senses this change via various receptors, and that signal will go to the control center, and here it is your endocrine gland inhibition. Okay, once that signal or control signal has the stimulus or has the message that the hormone level is going up, there will be a change in the hormone level via effectors. Now effectors will bring the hormone level down by decreasing the secretion, and the response will be lower level of hormones, or it will bring back the hormone level to the normal set point. Similarly, if you see here, if it becomes too low, then also the stimulus will be checked by receptors. It will again go to the control center. From there, it will go to the effectors, and effectors can bring the level back to the normal. So that's how the hormonal controls are mainly controlled by a negative feedback loop of homeostasis, in which if something happens in one direction, automatically body will try to bring it back to its set point. Okay, and this is how it happens.